I now give the floor to His Excellency Arnoldo André-Tinoco, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica.
Excellencias,
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Mr. President, Costa Rica congratulates you, President, on your election to the helm of the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly. We are confident that your wealth of political experience will be crucial to the success of the work ahead. A maelstrom of challenges is shaking the foundations of this building. The pandemic has now been raging for 3 years, and still 30.3% of humankind has yet to receive a single vaccine dose. The climate crisis and the crisis of biodiversity loss are lashing us mercilessly and indiscriminately in Pakistan, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Costa Rica. We are experiencing these crises today firsthand. However, it is the most vulnerable countries who are stepping up their efforts, creating large protected areas and conservation areas and increasing their adaptation and mitigation efforts. At the same time, the biggest carbon emitters and those responsible for climate disasters remain unaccountable. The Russian invasion of Ukraine not only violated the principles of the Charter, but it has also triggered a humanitarian, fuel, and financial crisis that will drive millions of people into food insecurity and poverty. Moreover, the invasion also put our collective security system in check. It produced renewed divisions and polarization, creating geopolitical and economic blocs pitting the East against the West and the North against the South. All of this has occurred at the very moment in which we needed to build more bridges and fewer walls. It all occurred at a time when we could not lose sight of the situation in Yemen and Mali, in Myanmar and Syria, in Libya or in Haiti, in Tigray or the Sahel, nor the situation between Israel and Palestine. The attacks on democracy and human rights, especially those against women and girls, also know no borders. The decline of democracy is evident in Central Asia, Eastern Europe, the Asia-Pacific region, and in my own region. In my region, the situation in Nicaragua demands the urgent attention of the international community to ensure the release of hundreds of political prisoners, the restoration of freedom of expression and the freedom of the press, the exercise of civil society's right of association, and the return to democracy. In terms of rights, the cruelest example of rights violations can be found in Afghanistan, where, for the past year, girls older than the 6th grade have been banned from attending school. This has left them even more greatly exposed to violence, poverty, and exploitation. We have come to this assembly to identify comprehensive solutions to the manifold crises we face, because it is impossible to end poverty without empowering women and girls. It is impossible to ensure respect for human rights without addressing climate change, and it is impossible to address the reform of the international financial system without new parameters for the allocation of aid. First of all, for Costa Rica, the response to the multiple crises facing us must be underpinned by a rights and obligations-based approach. Human rights and the unmitigated, unequivocal respect for human dignity and worth are not words alone. They are obligations undertaken by states and enshrined in the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and all human rights treaties and instruments. They are also the expression of the legitimate and universal aspirations of each person, of all peoples who are, after all, the ones who allow us to be in this solemn hall and to speak on their behalf. Costa Rica is in no way exempt from challenges and gaps when it comes to the full enjoyment of human rights, the construction of a culture of peace and non-discrimination, and the achievement of sustainable development goals. We too face challenges and gaps here. We are aware that the fight against poverty, inequality, and marginalization requires human rights. These human rights are not, nor should they be, a stumbling block. They are nothing less than the only way forward. Costa Rica has never closed its doors to migrants who see in our country a transit route or a destination and who come to integrate into our society. We are the fourth country in the world in terms of receiving our receipt of refugee applications per capita. In 2021, we welcomed the largest number of Nicaraguan citizens. However, given our economic situation and reduced fiscal space, and given the phenomenon of mass migratory flows, we have certain limits on our capacity for action. And this has jeopardized the coverage that we can provide to the hundreds of thousands of people who have sought refuge on our soil, coverage that we have always provided. It is with a real sense of urgency that we come here to ask for the support of the international community to address this challenge, a challenge that has been exacerbated not only by conflict and poverty, but also by the impact of climate change. In a context of manifold and accumulated crises, human rights must forge new paths. Costa Rica welcomes the fact that on the 28th of July, this General Assembly recognized the universal right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. For my country, this is a beacon of hope that can be compared to the proclamation of the right to water, to development, or to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is the correct response to the threefold planetary crises of pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss. This resolution is not a point of arrival, but rather a point of departure. Costa Rica will continue to work with member states, the United Nations, and all stakeholders to break down the silo mentality and to provide effective solutions to human problems, particularly solutions for those who suffer the most vulnerable, and the most marginalized among us. Faithful to our commitment to this rights agenda, Costa Rica has decided to submitted its candidacy for election to the Human Rights Council for the period 2023-2025. Costa Rica respectfully request the support of the members of this General Assembly for its candidacy. In our country, you will find an ambitious stakeholder who will watch over and protect the rights of all people everywhere in the world. You will also find us to be a country that will readily commit to dialogue, mutual understanding, cooperation, and solidarity in favor of human beings. My second point: human security is key to global security. For my country, it is inconceivable that while millions of people are awaiting vaccines, medicines, or food to save their very lives, the richest countries continue to prioritize their arms resources to the detriment of people's well-being, climate health, and equitable recovery. In 2021, global military spending continued to increase for the 7th consecutive year to reach the highest figure ever recorded in history. Today, Costa Rica reiterates its appeal for a gradual and sustained reduction in military spending, because the more weapons we produce, the more our efforts at management and control of these weapons will prove ineffective. It is a question of prioritizing the lives and well-being of people and the planet over profits to be made from weapons and war. It is a question of investing in and actively building alternative approaches to security, approaches that facilitate cooperation and care rather than competition and violence. We are convinced that it is also possible to achieve peace and security without resorting to the use of nuclear weapons, because the total elimination of nuclear weapons is the only guarantee against their use or threat of use. Costa Rica urges more states to sign and ratify the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, as well as to adhere to the Vienna Declaration and Action Plan. We also urge the Russian Federation to cease its attacks on Ukraine, its civilian population, and critical infrastructure. We urge the Russian Federation to demilitarize the Zaporizhzhia plant and not to resort to nuclear coercion, which we condemn in the strongest terms. Costa Rica calls on both parties to ensure respect at all times and in all circumstances for international human rights law and for international humanitarian law. The third transformative solution must be a financial one. Middle-income countries face significant inequalities and challenges. These include a reduced fiscal space that limits our capacity for action and investment and puts our social fabric at risk, despite the fact that we are home to the highest percentage of poor people and migrants in the world. Our income categorization does not allow us to access ODA or to obtain concessional financing on favorable and fair terms. Consequently, it is urgent to go beyond GDP per capita. We must have new parameters for the allocation of aid, investment, and international cooperation. These parameters must take account of other aspects such as structural deficiencies, climate risks, market fluctuations, and fiscal stability. A fourth action requires a higher level of ambition and urgency if we are to address the threefold planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. To address these challenges, safeguarding marine resources and ocean health is of the utmost importance. Weathering the worst effects of the natural disasters that lash our countries, droughts, heat waves, forest fires, floods never seen before, are the people themselves. With those people in mind, Costa Rica, together with France and the United Kingdom, is leading the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and the People. This seeks the conservation of 30% of the earth and 30% of the ocean by 2030. Costa Rica has successfully conserved 30% of waters under national jurisdiction 9 years ahead of schedule, invites other states to meet this common goal. Moreover, alongside the French President Emmanuel Macron, we announced our interest in co-hosting the third United Nations Ocean Conference in 2025, as well as our interest in holding a meeting in mid-2024 in Costa Rica that will bring together the scientific community and civil society to create innovative solutions for ocean governance. The ocean is an immeasurable and critical resource for the very continuity of life on Earth. Therefore, on the International Day of Peace, Costa Rica issues a vehement appeal for the adoption of a declaration of peace for the ocean. We cannot survive as a species without our ocean. We will not be able to fulfill our many obligations to the Sustainable Development Goals without a healthy ocean. Mr. President, let us support the Secretary General's initiative for a new agenda for peace, an agenda which strengthens our collective capacity to prevent conflict and resolve existing conflicts with sustainable, locally driven solutions. Let us renew the social contract which binds our governments and peoples, anchoring governance arrangements in human rights, trust, inclusion, protection, and participation. Let us guarantee gender parity and empower women, and in particular girls, in all spheres of life. Let us seek new methods to measure development that adequately reflect essential aspects such as environmental sustainability, inequalities, and structural gaps, as well as the quality of institutions and the prevalence of the rule of law. Let us build a multilateral system and a United Nations system that is more resilient, transparent, and inclusive, and systems that better embrace the needs and perspectives of all. This is particularly true for the Security Council. Let us do more to pave the way for the United Nations to fully rise to the occasion. Let us do more so that it has the skills and determination to do what it needs to do. Let us help the UN and our own countries to change the course of our common destiny while there is still a destiny to shift. Let us act with conviction and courage, with determination, and with a true sense of urgency. The time is now. Thank you.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica.